So let me just tell you a story. So my wife decided she wanted to bicycle.
I'm gonna do minutes tonight. Okay.
I did it my whole
We'll
life.
take some, so.
It's scary.
But anyway, so my wife said she wanted to own 10 spaces. So we went, not bikes.
Yes.
Right, today is
Okay, I think we're ready to get started.
So,
Is that attorney
so,
welcome. I think the microphones.
Oh, we're on. Thank you.
Okay, welcome. We're going to start with our roll call. Maybe we can start with Brian.
Brian Stewart, CPRD Board of Directors.
Brian, you need a mic.
Pat Smith, Liaison.
Bob Freshman, Trails Committee.
Dennis Wiley.
Sukheenai.
Lauren Pfieffer.
Danna Kemp.
And in our audience,
Hi, I'm David Head.
welcome.
Jason Fields, board liaison.
Sort of.
Okay.
And Brian Grove.
Very good.
This has been Brian. I'm just kidding.
Okay, thank you so much for the minutes. Ohm and Lauren combined put together extraordinary effort, I thought. And everyone got a chance to see the minutes. Do we have any changes recommended to the minutes? Does anyone have a motion to approve the minutes?
I wrote it, so I make a motion.
Very good. A second?
I'll second it.
Dana seconds it. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Very good. Okay, we have a guest tonight that's going to give us a presentation, and that's David Heddy. David, maybe you could step up to the podium there, and do we have David's presentation ready to go on the screen?
I don't have that.
Can we send it to you quickly, or
Yeah,
and where should we send that?
1 second.
I sent that to Kat
Yeah,
several days ago.
let me find it. Hang on a sec.
I have it now, so just give me a second.
Okay.
That was quick.
Scary.
Well, how
All right, I
quick?
have two of them, a handout and a presentation. You want the presentation?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, hold on. Yeah, this was emailed to me, but it got buried with all my alerts.
Respect your honesty there, Richard.
Eh,
I'm sure none of us know anything about that.
Yeah, that's not. Have you seen this on the? That's my no.
Never bought
You're good for like 20 minutes, including questions and things, so,
No, but they
Try to get through it. I really want to hear questions.
okay.
okay.
That's it.
Oh, yeah, we're on top of
I just have to figure a best way of getting this on the screen.
that, some form.
There's a good picture there, David.
Hey, thank you. A lot more gray over the last few years, and I'm getting, you're aging.
It happens.
Does it?
It does.
Are we ready?
Take you to get that.
Almost. Give me a second.
Okay.
Quite a few.
I think you can start, David, and he'll
Okay.
catch it.
Okay. Thank you so much for having me. My name is David Heddy. That's been said a few times now. And I'm here to talk about bicycle trails in the district. So I'm going to introduce myself quickly, and then we'll get into this. But I really want to have time for questions and discussion. So I'll try to get through this. If I'm taking too long, just say, hey, come on, speed it up. Because the point is to be able to get some feedback and thoughts from you all. So thanks for the opportunity. I've been in Newberg almost 5 years now. I have 3 kids that are a part of the public school, a 15, a 13, and a 10-year-old. Live right over by the high school. And yeah, in the photo here, my son, he's 6'3". I have no idea where his height came from, but he towers over all of us. My daughter, she's 13, Annika, and then my youngest, Iris, in the pink helmet down there. Yeah, bicycling has been a big part of our life ever since I grew up in Houston, Texas, and I got my first mountain bike in high school. I was a junior, and I use that thing everywhere. We have, I think it's like 100 miles of paved trails in the woodlands north of Houston, and just rode everywhere. And actually, that's why I moved here to Newberg, was for my kids to have that same experience of not having to fight traffic, but just being able to use their bikes around town. So, yeah, it's an important, for me, bicycling is important because it is a mental health activity for me, just to be able to rejuvenate and, psychologically as well as just physical health. It's how I prefer to exercise. But for my family as well, just the time of social connection and being out in nature together is really important. So I want to just start off by saying that I come here in goodwill to really listen and understand. I have been a part a little bit of some of the ongoing conversation over the last, really it was my first CPRD board meeting was the one in here when Riley Park was banned for bicycles. And so I had no idea what was going on before that. And I've come to a few meetings since then. But I believe deeply in community and the voice of community and working together in goodwill. And so that's the spirit I come in. I don't want to argue. I'm not trying to take anything from anybody. I want to have a conversation and just present my opinion and my side of what I see happening here in town. So, with that, just a map here. Oh, sorry, if you can go 2 slides ahead. There we go, next one. Just a map. I've, as I mentioned, I grew up in Houston, went to college in Waco. Actually, one of the largest city parks in the United States is Cameron Park in Waco. That's where I really got my feet wet cycling, worked at a local bike shop, worked my way through college, and spent a lot of time in Cameron Park riding the trails alongside people on horses and so forth. I grew up and lived originally in Flint, Michigan, where I also rode bikes. The trails are a lot different there. A lot of it was along railroad tracks. But I've traveled a lot with my work with Habitat for Humanity and have biked in Boston, in Georgia. I lived some in southern Southern California, and then most recently here in the Northwest. And in all of those places, I've had access to good trails to ride a bike off-road. If you follow some of the data around cycling, people are moving more towards riding off-road. There's a lot of people riding gravel roads, and then a lot of uptick in mountain biking as well because of traffic safety. It's just, I'm sure all of you know, it's very scary going out there on the road. And so there's been a lot of interest in riding off-road. So as next slide, as we were looking 5 years ago for a town to live in, one of the criteria for us was access to local bicycle trails. It was that huge of an issue for me, again, going back to the mental and physical health piece, connection of my family, that I wanted to make sure that there was public land or special district land that we could access, and Newberg checked that box. So I had been riding up until a year ago, this past October, up at Riley Park, and it had been a wonderful experience. I had great encounters. I met a lot of people up there, you know, on shared, I guess at that point, yeah, it wasn't shared use, it was separated. But yeah, as a walker, as a runner as well, I've had lots of good interactions up there. So I definitely would have thought hard about moving to Newberg without access to trails. It's that important to me. Next slide.
When did you move here?
I moved here almost 5 years ago. And so we purchased a house, lived with in a small house behind some friends while we were remodeling. And so we live over on Jody Court, close to the high school. And so, yeah, so no bicycle trails nearby. And when I say nearby, the next slide, or in 2 slides, talks a little bit about that. But something that was really special to me was being able, after work, to take off and go up to Riley and ride. It was something that I could take my kids and enjoy that within 10 or 15 minutes, be up there, have a 30, 45-minute bicycle ride and be home. And it doesn't take a couple hour round trip. So close access like that is really important for citizens to be able to recreate. So yeah, here's where we can currently access trails like what I'm going to describe here in a moment. So I'll start way over here on the right. That's the gorge. And the farthest one is the Columbia River Gorge. This is Powell Butte, which is a great small, about 9 miles of trails, mixed use. And then over on the left is One Day. That's about a 40-minute drive. It's called Panther Creek. It's going to be kind of supposed to be a really, really nice mountain biking area. I haven't seen maps and that sort of thing, but I know it's one day going to be a really nice spot. And then Chehalem Ridge, and I think that's Hag Lake over there as well. So this, it's a 30, 45-minute drive. Next slide.
Is Panther Creek the one in McMinnville?
Yeah,
Or outside of
it's
McMinnville?
on,
I couldn't tell. Yeah.
It's on BLM land
Okay.
west of McMinnville. And it's, as I understand it, it's still a negotiation. The land hasn't been appropriated for Yamhill County and other partners to be able to develop that land. So I want to quickly just talk about what is mountain biking. As I said, I've been doing this a long time. I've done every type of biking, cycling that there is. And just like, there's race cars and there's off-road trucks and there's, sedans that you drive around, minivans. It's varied, the type of cycling as well. So you'll see on the left, those are a little more extreme types of mountain biking that also is called downhill mountain biking. There's specific trails for that are not in our district. That is more like Sandy Ridge. There may be some of that. I don't think that's planned for Panther Creek. There may be a little bit of that. But where you see significant drops, people going very fast, wearing gear, that sort of thing. So that's more on one end of the spectrum. What you see over here, this is a recent photo of my daughter. We were riding, I think that is over Silver Falls, I believe, over in that area. So more of kind of a recreational type nature cycling, if you will. That's the kind of riding mostly that we have done up at Riley and that we enjoy. So there's lots of different types of trails. There's paved, there's street sidewalks, there's separated trails that are paved for mixed use. There's what I was just describing, more of recreational nature cycling. There's great little areas called like skills tracks or pump tracks. Maybe you've heard of those. They're smaller. They take about a minute to go through, and you often don't have to pedal. You can use your momentum, and kids use them a lot because you can, a park district or whomever can put one in, and it's a small feature, but people come to it and really enjoy it. Similar to BMX, but different, but kind of in the same category. And then, as I was mentioning, more of that downhill extreme mountain biking. Next slide. So, okay, I'm gonna go through these quick, but really bicycle trails have a lot of benefits for a town like ours, especially in a rural area where so many dollars come in for recreation. And there's great statistics on this. One I looked at recently was that outdoor recreation's impact on Oregon's economy was $8.4 billion in 2023. So it improves livability. So it helps keep people in place that want access to that sort of thing. It boosts the local economy. So people like myself that might be out there with friends and want to grab a meal or hang out. I don't think a small park would draw in a lot of people from outside, but I know there have been outside users of our parks, and I think those people are also folks that would use our local economy as well. It improves the health of citizens. It increases connection, social connections, and probably for me the biggest thing is just mental health. I think it's why we all love being outside, just being able to decompress and take in fresh air. Next slide. So I'm not going to get too deep into this, but the ones I think we're most familiar with are CPRD trail surveys, as well as something I was involved in was the Chehalem Cultural Center master planning meetings for Riley Park. That was actually my first experience with some of CPRD, was being in that meeting, and we went around and kind of like put sticky dots on different features of potential aspects of Riley, what people have interest in. And there was, I don't know how many people were there, but there were maybe a couple hundred folks or 150 people, and there was a lot of energy for cycling. So there's a lot of interest. People want bicycle trails. They want to have access to this. Next slide. So this is state this is CPRD. So 87% in the trail survey said trails are important to the community. Next slide, 81% said they support more trails. So this is job security for all of you. This was from the survey. The question was, at what level do you agree with the statement, the variety of trails is adequate? And so people that ride bicycles, 30% said they agree, 54% said they disagree, trails are adequate. So there are, if you look at that report, there's a lot of different trail users. For horse riders, it was kind of the flip. It was 50-ish% said they agree that there's a variety of trails that's adequate, and then 30 said they disagree. Yeah, that slide here, just what people are using CPRD trails for. So really there's 20%, I don't know where they're riding. Oh, I think the survey probably people are recollecting on trail use that they've had access to. So 20% saying they use CPRD trails, 92% walking or hiking. So just it's an untapped opportunity for folks. The next two slides, it just really gets into it's very similar across the state. About 20% of people are saying they use trails for cycling.
Hey, David, sorry, can you remind me what the population was of the CPRD survey and respondent rate?
I'm really interested if the trail committee knows this, but I know they got a representative sample, which is very important for research and surveys like this. So I think I remember it was close to 1,000 responses. You're saying no, but no?
I don't say anything.
Okay.
I
I can look it up, but
I think
do
that's
you?
correct.
Somewhere close to that, maybe 900.
And sometimes, I keep thinking of 1279, but it's
Close
close.
to nine.
For a survey, it was kind of overwhelming
Yeah.
for the population.
So I do a little bit of surveying work in my current job, and the key is, are you meeting that number for the population size? And I know they hit that number. But
Percentage
I don't know.
of people responding.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. Representative sample to make it statistically verifiable.
Yeah.
Next slide. So I want to talk just for a moment, keep going, thank you, about what makes a good trail. So I think it was the trail committee prior to you all had talked to the board, and y'all correct me if I'm wrong here, about getting input on what would make a good trail. And so I worked on that alongside Brian, and then a few other cyclists, Brian Bowman right here. And so, Brian, correct me on any of these I get wrong, but basically here's some recommendations of what make a good mountain biking area for like what we might have in a district like this. So adequate parking and bathrooms and signage, a decent amount of trails that you're not just doing like small little circles, but like some varied trails that you can go in and out of trees and that sort of thing. Some like climbing. I don't know how we came up with 400 feet. I don't know if you remember that, Brian, but some varied so you can sort of get out of breath a little bit and have that sense of you're working. That the trail surface would be natural and native, if you will. So doesn't need to be perfectly groomed, that sort of thing. Gravel isn't the best surface like the small rocks, just more of a natural surface. Mixed vegetation in and out of shaded areas. And then just a mix of the trail difficulty, but mostly easy and maybe a little bit of moderate. And then the next slide looks at we're not going to get into this, but the International Mountain Bike Association, the IMBA, does a really good job at trail difficulty. And so they differentiate between easy, easiest, easy, more difficult. And I think one of the differentiating features is in easy, it's like a 4-inch on the trail, like a 4-inch drop. And then on moderate, it goes up to like 8 inches. So really kind of that green space is what, with a little bit of blue. Next slide. Okay, so the district master plan, as I understand it, calls for mountain bike trails. We had them at Riley. I was just talking a little bit here with Jason, and I don't know the history, and I'm not an expert at all in that, so I don't want to stand up here and act like I do. I don't know what access was like. I just know I was welcomed up there to ride for the last, several years.
So,
before I mentioned.
I don't know, Matt, do you want to clarify the history on that date, because it wasn't actually from 2014?
No, it wasn't until like 2020.
Yeah, and then, okay,
Because we don't want to.
derail that, yeah.
And just a time check too.
Okay, where are we at?
About 5 minutes.
It was much more
Okay.
current than that, yeah.
Okay, so lost access in 2023. We talked about some replacement trails. I know that was something you all as a board were exploring. There hasn't been an alternative made, and then there's nothing close by. Next slide. So some questions I'm bringing is there a location? Is there adequate funding? Is there a timeline? And is there potentially an intermediate solution to satisfy the community's needs? Next slide. So in all of these areas, Chehalem Ridge, Powell Butte, Stubb Stewart, many of the parks around this area are all shared use. Have good signage, opportunity to learn rules, that sort of thing. These work very, very well, and I know it's a difficult ask here, but is there space in this intermediate time for people like me that want to access trails to have a portion of Riley to ride a mountain bike? I know that's a very complicated and difficult answer for you all, but until we figure something out, there's 20% of us that don't have any access to anything. And so I just want to bring that out to you all. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Well done.
Any questions or
I
thoughts?
always have
Yes.
questions. I'm a couch potato person, so I bike a little bit. I have two questions. When you show up the three parks or trails that share use and split among what hiker and the biker only? So there's some
It's
equestrian too?
Yeah, it's shared use in the sense that typically, and somebody correct me here if I'm wrong, but the user that has the preference is an equestrian, and then a pedestrian, somebody hiking, walking, and then a bicycle. So there's a yielding system on the trail. So they're shared use in the sense they all use them at the same time, but there's a preference. So if a horse is coming through and there's a walker, the walker has to step off the trail so the horse can get.
That's
Get by.
lead to a second question of me. What is the mountain bike etiquette? Because from I see on the picture, it seemed to be, the speed is high, and the way you're dressed, you wear a goggle, and talking about the horse might get spooked, and
Yeah.
so if
So
all
yeah,
three.
there's a picture. And that was my whole point of the varied. This is mountain biking. This is mountain biking. So you can see they're not wearing specialized.
But on the
gears.
left hand,
Yeah, that's what we call
helmet.
downhill or extreme
Extreme.
mountain biking. That's not available here in our district.
So
This
you were
is-
talking about that one
Yes,
that you
yeah,
used.
this is.
But there were races held at
Yeah.
Riley, right? There were
Yeah.
races held
I
at
don't
Riley.
know any races.
Yeah, there were
So-
there were signs posted for races.
So just to
Yeah.
I'll jump in here. So
Yeah.
We shouldn't be rehashing the Riley
Yeah.
Park issue, but you do bring up some good points regarding access for mountain biking trails, what we've identified, what kind of properties we have, what kind of properties could we have in the future. And there's two things that I know I've talked about, but I'm only speaking for me personally.
Yeah.
There's a property we have about 100 acres on the river. It is virtually inaccessible right now because of the road situation on 219.
Yeah.
It's planned to someday be a campground.
Cool.
We have a couple obstacles to that. A few $1 million, I think, would be the first obstacle, and then
big one.
getting the access to the
Yeah.
park from a transportation standpoint. That park, in my opinion, would meet all the kind of criteria for a
Yeah.
good green and blue
Yeah.
level
Cool.
mountain biking park. There's open area, there's treat area, there's good grade in parts of it.
Nice.
It's pretty. Part of
Nice.
it is farmed right now.
Mhm.
The issue with that would be getting access. So I've talked to staff a bit.
Mhm.
I know I've talked to Clay. I talked to Dawn previously about maybe some sort of a park and ride in kind
Yeah.
of a situation.
Yep.
It would be more primitive area, but it is
Yeah.
very close to town,
Potential.
and it's a nice spot, and it's land that we're not using.
Yeah.
The other one that was kind of I thought would be a really good idea, but some people didn't like it, and I don't know if it was an emotional response or not, but there's property that the county owns, which is an old landfill. As you know, not most parks, but
Yeah.
many parks are retired landfills. So saying a park on a landfill shouldn't be a bad thing. That's
Yeah.
actually kind of, I mean,
Mhm.
we're all very fond of Ewing Young Park, for example, which is on a landfill. So,
Yeah.
now that land I found very interesting because significant grade and slope.
Mhm.
Now it wouldn't be the technical level of a
Right.
sandy ridge at all, but you actually have a lot
No.
of
Yeah.
you have a lot to work with there. And then there's a adjoining piece of property there that is a potential for the district someday once it's developed. That's currently owned by Baker Rock. So
Oh yeah.
quite a bit of land there.
Yeah.
And you can probably quote me on this, but it might take 20 years. This is going to be
Yeah.
a park someday.
Yeah.
100%. This will be a riverfront park system. There will be a riverfront trail system. and with the slope from the top to the bottom, it would make sense to me that it would be very good for a certain level of mountain biking,
Yeah.
more an intermediate level.
Yep.
Yeah, and then there's another, I want to say 18 or 20 next to it. So when you combine them, you're
Yeah,
talking about
there's
a pretty
some
good
good
piece of
space.
land. Both of these pieces of land are even closer to the average urban Newberg Dundee resident
Yeah.
than even Riley Park,
Yeah.
which is rural. It's a little bit of a drive.
It is.
You
Yep.
gotta, put the bike rack on your Subaru and take off.
Yeah.
So both of these could be a, ride out your back door,
Yeah.
ride down the Newberg Dundee bypass trail. So that's the other thing I was gonna mention.
Right. Connected.
We
Yeah.
are likely moving forward. I mean, we'll know for sure this budget, but we have plans to have a section of the Newberg Dundee bypass trail also put in. Different kind
Cool.
of trail system, obviously, than
Yeah.
a forested or rural
Yeah,
system.
but important.
But it is a bike path, very specific to allow for there's plenty of space. It's
Yeah.
like a one-lane road.
Yep.
And that will connect a couple different parts of town. So for transportation
Yeah,
purposes,
yep.
and I mean, you're not going to get a workout.
People will
but-
exercise on it,
Right.
though. Yeah.
So those are a few things. There may be more things. I don't even know every piece of land
Yeah,
we have.
yeah.
Brian, you might know more.
Well, you
if-
covered the three major
Okay.
possibilities.
Okay.
Or upcoming or whatever.
Yep.
potential.
In the interest of time, we'll do one more question.
May I?
Sure.
Since I don't know much about
Sure,
the
yeah,
mountain
you bet.
biking, how damage of the mountain biking or biking to the trail, is it create lots of damage or just minimal damage?
I am not a scientist, so I can't really tell you exactly. But I mean, in my experience, any sort of activity does have some impact on the trail. I would say it's not anything drastic. Cycling. I mean, if you were doing the more extreme type of cycling, in pounding and riding through mud and that sort of thing, then it would definitely have impact. But I don't think it's it's not drastic. I mean, I've been riding trails all over the U.S. and that's not been a major concern for park departments.
I'd like to make a quick comment.
Yes.
Here's the deal. This board, our board, is committed to finding a spot.
Okay.
Unfortunately, we've gone through a time where we've changed out our superintendent.
Yeah. Yep.
So we've had a lot of things going on around here. But we are committed to finding a location.
Cool.
We are. So
Yeah.
keep
and I'm
on
here.
us because
Yeah.
we're looking for it.
I honestly, I want to have a discussion and keep this going. And yeah, I know it takes time. It's not something that happens overnight. And so I'm not complaining, but I'm trying to do the best I can as a representative of the cycling community. And yeah, please invite me back. I'll try to make it as I can. And thanks so much for listening. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Thank you, David.
You.
That was a great presentation.
It was quite good.
Yep.
Okay, we're going to move on. Our next item is a follow-up to our tour that we did at Riley Park. And thank you, Om, kind of summed up what we thought we had as a conclusion. You want to do that again for us?
I don't remember what I said.
Here.
I sent an email.
Om's email was essentially, we were talking about, we'd be looking at signing that main loop that we had walked
you.
ourselves. Identified a few areas where maybe we could develop that more for picnicking and that kind of thing.
So,
Bob sent another email talking about possible memorial benches. We can talk about that in a minute. The one thing I had that I wanted to follow up on is I really tried to follow along on the map as we were walking, and I found that I was so confused I could not figure it out. And what really struck me is when I went to Bob, who walks every day there. I said, Bob, can you tell me where we are? And he said, I can't, looking at that map, I can't really tell you where we are. And it really struck me, and I wondered, why is this so challenging? So I went and I looked at the trail inventory work that was done that was describing all the different segments. And I started realizing that, a lot of these trails are probably the single tracks that were put in when there was mountain biking there and other things happening. And I was looking specifically at the tread width of the trails. And I looked at Forest Service, their standards for equestrian design. And if we're talking about right now as a shared use between pedestrian and equestrian, I wanted to know what's the minimum trail width for that. And they said it's 36 inches and that's narrow. That's for very lightly used backcountry. It's way wider for heavily used, more of an urban kind of setting with equestrians and things. They're talking more like 6 and 8 feet, which we do have on a number of the trails. But when I looked at the inventory, I found, well, there were 6 segments that were under 2 feet, less than 2 feet wide. And then there were 16 segments that were less than 16 inches, like 10 and 12 inches were many of those. So what I wanted to talk about is maybe recommend to Brian, when you're looking at trying to develop this map, don't map those trails that are not meeting the standard for a shared use equestrian pedestrian trail. And if you eliminated from the map essentially 22 segments, I think you'd start seeing a map that like you could follow, that sort of makes sense. And almost all these are on the east side of these really super narrow trails.
Actually, there are quite a few on the west side that you haven't seen.
They,
In fact, that's probably where the largest quantity of the narrow trails are.
not according to the inventory.
You'd have to go there and actually, I haven't measured.
Well,
them.
I looked at the inventory and looked at the maps, and it was a majority of them were on the east side. There may be a few on the west side.
But I think it changes every year too, as the growth, and if there hasn't been.
It could be. This was done in
maintenance.
'23, so it's
Yeah.
a couple of years since we've done that. But before you go into trying to develop a map, I think that's something that you and your staff should really consider. And I'm not essentially saying close them off, that's up to the district, but maybe not show them on the map so that we can come up with a map that someone could theoretically utilize and not be lost. I think it'd be interesting to just see if you struck out, all those segments, and there's 22 of them, what that map would then look like.
Yeah, I mean, when we were walking it, and I think we all agree that we wanted to determine like what the main trails were,
Right.
For signage and the map and where to start.
Yeah.
And I think what you're suggesting, Dennis, is a good way to have clear lines as to what could be the main trails, right?
Yep.
And what needs to be mapped. And I think that's a good way to tackle it. Certainly, and maybe we still don't have to sign all those, right? But at least that would give us some concrete parameters to what
Right.
could be the main trails. And then I think we went a little backwards, maybe a year or so ago, because there are some trails that are this big that are labeled hiking only. I don't know if you guys saw some of those. There's big thick posts and there's brown signs that say hiking trail only, and they're not very long. They just kind of loop back onto the main trails. They're pretty short.
I thought the board talked about removing those signs.
Okay, so
I thought that was one.
yeah, so that would be part of
At a board
this.
meeting we talked about, I can
Is
follow
that
up.
we
Okay.
is that we remove those too, because those are, I mean, they're like single track for feet. They're pretty skinny, but I think that's a good way to objectively determine what might be the trails that we map. I am not in favor of closing any trails, because I think if we have enough mapped and signed, and because as you guys saw on the east side, they kind of all loop back on each other eventually, then I don't think there's any I don't think there's a safety reason to close some of those trails. We could talk about the west side, might be
Well,
a different story,
You know,
but
there are some aesthetic reasons as far as you don't want to see someone right next to you walking on a trail that's, 10 yards away that's paralleling you. It's kind
Yeah.
of takes away from the feeling.
there's a few trails on the east side
And then,
that
and
you
then-
can
and
see
for
another
wildlife
trail. Yeah,
purposes and just
Yeah.
natural resource purposes, there's reasons why not to have trails right
I
next to
see.
each other.
yeah.
So
But-
anyway, something to consider.
Brian, we've talked about actually having a service professionally map this out, right?
Definitely looking into that, to deliver a final project, product or whatnot.
I think you'd have to.
I think it would behoove us to do that.
Mhm.
Coming to a consensus on being able to convey that and see how we end up is what these productive group sessions are about. So we have to start somewhere, and listening to what your group and previous groups have mentioned, the main loops or something, you know what I mean? And we all experienced that in our last field trip. Makes perfect sense.
Right. I just
Making sure
couldn't,
the signage is removed, and
I
I
just-
think we had them all, and Craig might have noticed one that, oh,
Just
let's get that post out.
looking at this, I couldn't figure out the main loops,
Right.
even though we walk them.
Yeah,
So-
no, you can't.
Well,
So
it's
that's a
actually-
problem.
It's not just
No.
you.
Well, as you mentioned, it was a
Yes. it's-
project that was put together in terms of GIS and everything else, and layered, and very extensive in terms
Oh, yeah.
of all the information that's there, but it was never meant to be, it's more engineered drawing, right? It was
Right.
never
Yeah.
meant to be.
Right.
So it is what it is right now, and the district puts something out there when we have people
Right.
up there, but this is getting us to where we're gonna go,
Yeah.
and I think what I'm hearing makes perfect sense.
Okay.
But when you talk about a service, Brian, like, so we don't need a service to
No, not tell us what trails are gonna be
to
what, what they're gonna be named.
re-engineer it, right? We just
No.
need the mapping service or the drawing the map, right?
Yeah, or, I don't know, it's not a marketing group or whatever, but people that create signs. So if you go to the
Yeah.
Park Service or whatever, they didn't necessarily do that internally. They
Yeah,
went
yeah.
out to an outside source. In any other park district, or if you go to Bend or anywhere, they'll get their trail signs.
Yeah.
And so there's companies that do that and make it user-friendly for the eyes and interpret-wise, and I think we should pursue that for sure. You gotta take them, your information though, right? I mean, they're
Yeah.
working for you, so.
Yeah.
So this is getting us to that point,
Yeah.
so that's a big leap, what we're talking about today, so that helps a lot. So us internally could go to, take the information that Dennis has put here and look at those 22 segments, and this isn't taking anything off or whatever, but, because there's people that are quite familiar with the park, like several on this board here or whatever, our commission, that can use those trails, and they use them, well, that's naturally gonna keep those in play, right? So, that's fine. We won't cause any safety problems with anybody if they go, oh, where's that go? More people
Yeah.
are apt to, especially occasional users or whatever, stay on the main mark, there's plenty of area to see on those main mark loops, right, initially, so.
I have to
This is
say,
good stuff.
after the field trip we did, I was even more enthused seeing the progress that you've made. And I know the folks that work for you have done a great job of getting the markers on the east side now, and saw them in all the trails that we walked on the other day.
And that's
which
just a
was-
start too, yeah.
which was
Thanks
great.
to you guys getting out there and saying, hey, these will be the main loops. That's the first step, put some cautionary markers out there. And then we'll come up with a good labeling system, because we'll revisit that. And then this is big here tonight to find out, okay, then let's get down to where we've got one big loop, we did the one field trip. And we can go throughout the park and eliminate those and come back, and we can go, let's all get together again and go, okay, does this loop on the west side make sense? Does this loop here? And then, the more that we accumulate that information, we'll find somebody here locally or, in the surrounding area that can help us out marketing wise. And create a map that would be consistent, and then we can reduce that down to each little trailhead that, hey, you're entering this big loop, and so I think that's big progress for sure.
Which brings us to, so we talked about doing another west side field trip then, as a follow-up.
Sign me up, tell me
And-
the date.
Could I Could I ask to
Absolutely.
coordinate that again? She did
Absolutely.
such a stellar job last
But we have to
time.
wait for the weather, right? You said the west is muddy, so
Yeah.
we might have to wait for a few weeks.
Did we want to try to get it in before
it's
our
just mud.
April 15th meeting or after?
We could schedule it and then see how bad it is.
So maybe look at just before that.
I'd be gone from
There really
April
aren't
4th to
that many
8th.
spots that are that wet.
can go
Most-
around the
vast
big-
majority
Okay.
is in very good
So
condition.
when were you gone and,
I'd be gone on April 4th to the 8th.
okay, so anytime after,
So-
our next
Before or
meeting is
after,
the
yeah.
11th, okay.
So we're looking somewhere between the 8th and
Okay.
our meeting on the 15th.
Night.
Okay.
Okay, very good, so.
And before we move on, Dennis, I just wanted to clarify, your suggestion was kind of just wants to only map the trails that are the standard width or the 22 segments.
That at least meets the standard for a shared use trail.
Okay.
Which is
Which would be
36.
36 inches.
Okay, thank you.
So who are we suggesting do that? Is that something we can
I-
do, or?
Well, I
Brian's
think Brian and his staff they're
So-
looking at how they're gonna mark the loops.
What I would suggest is if this committee agrees on this kind of plan or this method, present this to the board as part of the Trails Committee report, make that recommendation, and then ask the board to consider this during this upcoming budget, which is very, very soon. And then that alerts staff that, okay, if we need a vendor that will do professional mapping, we start working on not just the maps, but the big major post signs with the maps
Trailhead.
to put up at the park. That might be something we can really get going on this upcoming budget cycle.
Can
which
I
is in
have,
spring or summer.
can I have someone then make a motion regarding that?
Can I ask a quick question first,
Yeah.
though? So do we need to see what that looks like? You know, what if we say these are the 22 segments that are 36 inches wide? Do we need to see what that looks like before we agree that that's what we're going to do? I mean, what if there's what if there's not a trail that's wide?
Here's what I will ask our group to do. Before the next meeting, then if you could go to our webpage, which has the trail inventory for Riley, and go through that chart and look at all the ones that are under 36 inches. And you can see where they are, this trail segment, and look at those and see if you have issues. And then we will discuss this again
Okay.
at our next meeting before we move forward with a motion. How's it? That sound
Yeah,
okay?
that was just a question. I think if we are concerned about getting it in the budget, that's a trade-off, right?
Well, I guess another question is, do we want to just ask the district whether they intend to have these as a shared use trails between pedestrians and horses, should they be meeting a minimum standard or not?
Well, and just to throw this out, the board doesn't need the minutia and the details. This is something that the committee continue to work on with staff. So you don't have to bring anything super specific, but just the general concept, which is we feel that maps are very needed. We feel we have a plan. You know,
Okay.
there might be some details that get worked out, but if you present that to the board so that the rest of the board knows that this is a priority that the Trails Committee has, it's definitely a priority at Riley Park and in the master plan and for safety and for all these other various reasons, then it becomes more clear to us before budget, which is early April, that this is something we need to get in there. That doesn't mean we're locked into any specific
Okay.
detail.
Okay,
So we
And-
need to present to the board
At the next
at the
board
March
meeting.
meeting.
yeah.
To get for the budget,
Ideally,
Yeah.
ideally, because
Okay.
budget is April 8th.
Oh, yeah.
And this is above and beyond what Brian's already procured on the signage. I mean, because I'm thinking of it as part of the whole signage project, right? But this is hiring the outside vendor.
Brian can answer yes to that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, I was taking those.
So in-
We did budget, there's money in this year's
Okay.
budget that we've used, that we got the initial signs, the markers, and the tools to put those in, and different signage that we put up there, and sign for the other trails throughout the district. But, Matt Smith's advice there, it definitely, I would come to the next meeting on the
Okay.
27th. It is the end of budget time right now for
Yeah.
the
Okay.
supervisors getting that in.
And then in the
And I
mean,
did budget for an amount, again above that, but nothing to the level that we could escalate, getting the sign package together, kiosk built up there, certain other amenities that, things that we need going forward right away,
okay.
in my opinion.
And in the meantime, we can all take a look, given what Dennis has
Well,
I think
provided,
that's a good
yeah.
idea.
I think
On our own, yeah.
I'm just gonna propose that if we can have a coffee together and look at the map together, and you can explain to us, I mean, just like outside of the meeting. Like, you know, my day is, Friday is always good, you know, the 18th and 25th, and we can just meet someplace and talk about the standard width for the shared use, so we all have the same understanding instead of looking in it, not knowing. Would that be okay? And then take a look into the field trip. We can go to the 11. I apologize, Friday is always a better day for me to. So we can meet on this Friday the 14th, if you like, in the afternoon.
That April the 14th?
No, March 14th for
Oh.
us to go to look in the same inventory map.
That's this Friday.
This Friday. You
Yeah.
come out today. No. Okay, you can. That's fine. Yep.
Let's figure that out
Yeah.
via
Yeah,
email.
we can do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
We can talk
Yeah.
via email. Okay. All right.
I like the idea.
And last word on this subject, as far as the next field trip, if it matters, I am on vacation. The
You
13th to
cannot
the
be-
19th of that month.
Oh,
if it
so
matters to you.
let's
13th to
circle
the what?
the
19th.
19th.
Yeah,
Of
so, yeah,
April?
the 13th, I'm out of
Right,
town.
you're gonna miss our April meeting.
April, okay.
So let's circle on the 11th then on the field trip. Would that be okay?
I think it sounds good.
Maybe. I gotta look
Maybe.
and see what I have,
Okay.
so.
Yep.
And Brian, the signs that you guys did for you and Young, you did that all in-house, right? But that's
Right.
a smaller scale than we're talking about
Yeah.
up there.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
That was, the design on that
Microphone.
wasn't, the design on that wasn't exactly like I just keep using GIS or whatever, but the way that turned out up at Riley, it was already in the system like that. That
Oh,
Cat
I
had
see.
created years ago.
You had it ready to print, essentially.
Yeah, it was
Okay,
something they had used before, in terms of the way it was just drawn out.
Oh,
Because
it
it's just
was
a
the map
loop.
that-
okay.
The foundation
Through the park.
gave you, yeah.
Yeah, so they kinda did that in-house, but,
Yeah.
and that's not to say we couldn't do the same thing here. That's, we can investigate that, but, I think from the conversations I've had, it would behoove us to go to something at a different level. So,
Okay. Thank you.
Bob, did you want to talk about your memorial idea?
Sure, when we did the field trip with you, Brian, you pointed out some, spots for potential picnic tables and benches. And one in particular we're talking about is doing a memorial bench for Russ Sheehan, who is really the creator of so many of the trails, particularly on the east side. It wouldn't be anything like it is without Russ's work. And I'd like to see if that can be part of the budget, to get a bench for Russ, a nice bench with a plaque, and perhaps invite his family to come. If we, when we do that, just make it a little bit special. That was one thing. The other was, my wife reminded me that at Mary Young Park in West Lynn, they have benches, memorial benches, all over the trail system there. Some tables as well. And it seems like there's not a shortage of people that are happy to, pay for those memorial benches. So I sent out the information from Westland Parks and the cost and everything. And I just was suggesting that might be something we might consider, is for CPRD to offer the opportunity for people to purchase a memorial bench for somebody in their family or somebody that's important to them, they would pay for that bench. There'd be no cost to CPRD, and we would gain some nice benches and tables in the process. It seems like a win-win kind of situation. Anything that we can do without adding to what CPRD has to spend, I look as a good thing.
Yeah, I saw that. It was really interesting. It was a good program they have there. We have something, it's not similar, we don't promote, it's not a specific program for that, but, and you're probably aware, but that through the CPRD Foundation and/or direct donations, like at the last board meeting, for instance, people step up and they wanna donate a bench or whatever. But this was very structured, what you showed, and
Well, that, I
that's smartly
stole
done.
their
It was
information essentially, but it doesn't have to be just for Bob and Crystal Riley.
No.
It can be any of the parks within the district.
I like the idea because it had uniformity and it met certain standards
Mm-hmm.
and it literally spelled out everything too.
So anyway,
It can
that's
be
the thought.
burdensome, on
If
the district and
the
stuff.
board is
I
amenable
would
to
just,
that.
the district would need to develop policy regarding,
Right.
and West Lynn has policies.
And I think it's a good idea. It's something that also, if this committee wants to bring to a board meeting, and that can trigger the board potentially setting another foundation meeting. We just had a foundation meeting at our last meeting. And we could get one of those on the books and then have staff kind of look at that, what they have in West Lynn, and maybe the foundation would say, hey, we want to advertise this, put this online, let people know, hey, buy a bench through CPRD, the park, the name, the plaque, and we have it all. It's easy, right? And that's something I think we'd probably get a lot of success on. I could see that happening a lot, especially if we had an organized program for it.
Well,
So,
what might be good is for staff to determine where the benches are going to be and how many, like at Crystal Riley, we talked about some viewpoints and we talked about some picnic tables and some open space, so that like now you guys would say, okay, we have 10 picnic benches and 5 viewing benches, and sort of campaign for that, but limited quantity, because you don't want to have it go on and on forever.
Yeah, absolutely. It's
yeah.
almost like an addition to the master plan itself.
Yes,
You know, those
yeah.
elements are in there, but we could make that a priority. Yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff you can
Yeah.
do with something like this, for sure. To not just benefit Crystal Riley.
Right.
And you could do it with trees, you could do it with a
Yeah,
lot of things
that's
too.
a great idea.
And tables, of course. No, that's a good idea.
Okay, in the interest of time, we're gonna move on. We'll probably include this as additional discussions at our next meeting, I think, to follow up and talk some more about this. The volunteer recruitment we were talking about for our next item. I did send out today an email that I'd gotten from the Friends of Chehalem Trails regarding the work days that are already scheduled, and I kind of wanted to just hear your thoughts about that. And how does that affect the idea that we were going to do a work day as well? So,
Well, I can throw out I did chat with Danna and Lauren a little bit, excuse me, prior to the meeting. But we were looking at doing an actual trails workday at Bob and Crystal Riley Park. And I'm only saying to there because it, without a doubt, has the most trail work that needs to be done of any park. The events that they were proposing, like the workday in Bob and Crystal Riley Park in September is fine, but I would like to see us do one in the May-June timeframe when I think it's going to be more needed to start clearing trails, and actually pick a date for a work date, work with CPRD staff to determine what will work for them, and then find out the best way to publicize the trail days to the various groups, whether it be through the CPRD website, the CPRD Facebook page. There's a lot of other
Signs at the park we
avenues.
talked about, yeah.
Yeah.
Put up something on the
so
porta
Even a
potties.
sign,
So we had talked about using National Trails Day, and so they've already picked Ewing Young Park for National Trails Day, so I don't think we'd want to have a conflict there.
no,
And that's the first weekend in June. The September party that they were talking about, I believe OET is committed to helping with that.
Yeah, I'm interested in talking to
I know.
Matt Dolphin more about that because, yeah, it's what he's got committed because OET's membership is slim lately, so that may not be. I just would want to build that out a little bit.
I think
Understand.
he's associated with the recruitment, volunteer recruitment for OET.
Oh, I thought he was like field services or something like that.
Well,
But
that's
anyway,
what that is,
okay.
I think.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So I guess we don't have a lot
But
of
the more
time
the
tonight.
more the merrier. I just think we should. I agree. I don't think we should have two on the same day because then we're splitting
Right.
CPRD staff and
Yeah.
equipment, etc. Right?
And I think we should branch out to other organizations too that are interested too. Like we
Yeah.
had a request from the Valley View Riders to do some partnership up there too. They're a local equestrian group. So, not to put all of our eggs in one basket, but I think we can do,
Yeah.
we can organize any other trail cleanup, I think, too.
Yeah, and we talked to Cray about making a list of everything that he
Yeah.
would want help on, and we'll get that.
So
flushed
maybe
out
we
before
look
the-
at potentially July for a work-day? Since June is National Trails Day,
Oh.
that's already kind of taken.
I'd like to not wait till then if possible.
I don't, we can do any.
That's just my
Yeah,
opinion.
we can do any.
May or June, but not conflicting with the Trail Day event at Ewing Young though.
Yeah. Let's shoot for May or June, but a date that's not already scheduled.
I think the
May
main,
11th and June 7th are the two trail day plans.
and
that are
September.
proposed. Yeah.
So the main thing we need from Brian is, if we do a work day in May sometime at Riley, what do you need? And then we can determine how many people do we really have to come up with. Do we have bark to spread, do we work on some wet spots?
Yeah,
or
I'm sure with the experience at this table and on staff that we can find plenty to do.
Okay,
And,
Oh, there's plenty
it'd
to
be
do.
awesome.
okay.
And that includes interjecting other groups that you mentioned that might wanna help out too.
Yeah.
I think you guys have opportunity to engage with as many people as possible, as you want up there.
Is Memorial Day the 26th?
I know there's
Staff
4-H
totally
groups.
welcomes that, so whatever we can coordinate a date or pick a date between the dates, Matt.
Okay.
If you wanna think of something between May and June there and on a particular, a Saturday or whatever day you guys.
In the meantime, would you like to reach out to some of the groups you were talking about to see if they'd be interested in doing that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, and we've got 4-H and OET, not OET,
And
And
OSAC.
maybe they have
Teenagers out
some,
there.
maybe they have some ideas which dates would
Yeah.
work best for them, and if you could bring that to our next meeting
Okay.
then, or firm up that date.
I'd like to know, Brian, about the format of asking people to volunteer in, we mentioned teenagers. Do we need a waiver form, insurance, something like that? Can you give us more in details?
To the extent when we do a larger organized official thing that we would do that. The waiver thing's really easy to do. And if you're gonna do it, where you could actually register online, depending on, what numbers you wanna keep or whatever. We could either, if you're not doing it online, a formal thing like that, we could literally hand out forms that day and people can sign waivers.
Or QR code or something like
Yeah,
that?
or something, but that's, from what I understand about technology nowadays, when you organize your event, you can do everything literally online, and they just show up and they're ready to go, and everybody's butts are covered in terms of liability and everything else, so.
No need of
So the short answer
insurance?
would have been yes, I guess, to your question.
And no need of insurance, right? No need of insurance to volunteer?
For that day's event or anything, no.
No, okay.
If it's, it's supported by us, it's on public property and we're aware of it.
So we can communicate via email on the dates, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. Yeah.
Okay, anything else for this evening that we want to address?
I just had an anecdote about, so on Friday was our field trip, right? And we talked a little bit about, and I actually haven't had time to go back in the master plan to see if this is in there, but we were talking about crossing at the street and either a sign or lights or something, right? So on Saturday, I went to walk and there were two cars going 100 miles an hour, passing people, and there were horses on the road and people crossing on foot, also crossing. I stopped for like 10 people crossing from the east side to the west side. And so I just wanted to mention that if it's not in the master plan, again, it could very well be, I thought it was, but I'm gonna go back and double check. I think that should be something we really think about sooner rather than later. Even if it's just a sign, which we know somebody like that might not even pay attention to, but at least it gives the people crossing pause to be careful, be super, super careful.
It's in the master plan.
Oh, it is?
We talked about two crossings.
Oh, good,
I
okay.
wonder if we could work with the city to put in a sign
County.
on
County.
speed bumps.
County.
I know speed bumps suck, okay?
But maybe the county would put signs
The
up.
county, but
Yeah.
guaranteed if there's
They're never going
bumps,
to buy that.
Lauren, you were talking more about it by the
Yeah.
equestrian parking, right?
Yeah.
That blind corner there, yeah.
Yeah,
They
but
come
go by the
flying down
parking lot
ditch.
at the farmhouse.
Both
too.
places, they
Yeah.
just fly.
They could
And,
sign it.
and the day after that field trip, it was the worst I'd seen with these
Wow.
two cars. And I talked to one of the gals on horseback, and they, I would argue that maybe they shouldn't be riding horseback on Pear Mountain Road with how people drive up there now, but she said one of the cars came around the corner and almost rolled the car after
Oh.
the horses kind of surprised him, I called the sheriff but it's funny because this is, I think, the problem we run into is that I called Washington County Sheriff because that's where I saw the cars, and Washington's like, well, if they crossed into Yamhill or if they made it to Clackamas, and I'm like, oh my God, don't make me call 3 places. Can you guys just do that?
Just make it easier and call the FBI.
Yeah, exactly. So.
All right, anything else? No. Okay, with that.